You an LCD Sound System fan? They have a song called You Wanted a Hit. And it goes, you wanted a hit? We don't really do hits. I don't really do hits. I've had a lot of good luck, dumb luck, and a lot of timing. If I could just write hits, I'd write hits. It'd be great. Who wouldn't want to write a hit? But I don't necessarily have that instinct. And the biggest hits of my career, the most successful things have been the most idiosyncratic and been the ones that have really been just for me. And it ends up finding purchase in the larger world. But like Jimmy Olsen is a perfect example. It's no one's idea of a, like, wait, you're coming to DC. What do you want to do? Batman? Like, no, Jimmy, well, Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen.
This is Helioscope Studio. It's the largest collective of cartoonists and graphic novelists in North America. There have been a ton of great books made here, and we're going to tell you the story of one of them. The multiple Eisner-winning Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen.
I'm Matt Fraction. I write comics and sometimes television. I wrote Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen, with Steve Lieber.
Hi, I'm Steve Lieber, and I am the artist, the line artist of Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen. Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen is a multi-part story about Jimmy solving his own murder. And along the way, it's about friendship, it's about identity, it's about a life where so many weird things fly at you from every angle that change is the only constant. It's about the incredible weirdness of the DC universe, and it's about 300 pages long.
When the scripts started coming in, you knew it's like this was going to be a special book. And I think it's one of the best books that DC's published in the last decade.
It's easily the most important thing DC has published since More Fun Comics #1.
So, Jimmy has pivoted to video, and it's the only part of the Daily Planet that makes money. They have to encourage his behavior, and he gets tangled up in something that results in someone trying to kill him. He goes on the run. He needs to get out of Metropolis, and it's a perfect opportunity for him to do what he does in Metropolis elsewhere in the DCU. Someone's trying to kill me. Maybe I should get out of town for a little bit and solve my own murder. That's the setup of the book, basically, is Jimmy amok in the DCU. The short version is I said, I should do Jimmy Olsen as a joke. We all laughed. It was at my birthday dinner. Me and my wife and Brian and Elisa went out to dinner together. It was my birthday, and right after my birthday. And so we were just talking about how excited Brian was and what was going to come next. And then sort of realized, oh, wait, I actually could do that. And then it just kind of became like me saying to Brian, ask him if I get to Jimmy Olsen, because I didn't know anybody over there. And then they were curious, and I mean, honestly, I think it's just drafting on Brian, to be totally honest, and like they wanted to make Brian happy. There's something very fantasy football about Brian going from Marvel to DC, like suddenly the star quarterback is playing for a different team or whatever, and I don't think they wanted to draft on that excitement. But then suddenly Greg had this Lois Lane idea, and it was like me and Brian and Greg were doing like Jimmy, Lois, and Superman.
The big announcements about this book is that it has been confirmed that Greg Rucka and Mike Perkins are doing a Lois Lane book that starts the following month in June, and Matt Fraction and Steve Lieber are doing a Jimmy Olsen book. Back in the day, Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen both had books, both had very successful ongoing books for quite some time. Excited for the future of Superman right now. Bendis bringing in Greg Rucka for Lois Lane and Matt Fraction for Jimmy Olsen. That's kind of exciting. I think that's damned exciting, actually.
Why him? Why is he Superman's pal? Like, let's take this as a given, right? Let's take this as the reality of the world we've been given and we have to plan. So what is it about Jimmy that makes Jimmy worthy of being Superman's best friend? And to me, Superman's greatest power isn't a power, but it's his empathy. And it's like, oh, Jimmy's the only guy that's more interested in people than Superman. Jimmy can make a story about anybody. That's sort of Studs Terkel. Because Studs Terkel used to have a show on the Dumont network. And it was called, I think it was called Studs Place. And it was literally him at a bar talking to people.
This is Studs Place. Any minute there'll be a story happening here. Funny thing, there always is when we drop in. So you just settle back and come along.
And that was it. What do you do? What's that like? Where are you from? What are your parents like? Oh, you got any kids? And just like it's Studs Terkel doing what Studs Terkel does. So like just that idea of Jimmy being so genuinely interested in everyone and having that boundless curiosity and empathy and all of the kind of things that come with being more comfortable asking questions and answering them. Those were the kind of two binding polymers. Go anywhere, do anything. That's great. What does it mean to be a photographer that always hides your face with a camera? And what does it mean? You do that because you genuinely are curious about everyone and want to know and meet everyone and could be everybody's friend, you know? It just all felt right and good. And they went for it. Steve coming on board was, I think, the thing more than anything that let them know, like, no matter whatever the fuck he's talking about, Steve will land that plane. I think they could see it then. It didn't matter what I was whatever worms were falling out of my mouth. They were like, yeah, but Steve will make sure it all works as a comic.
I could ask myself questions if that helps.
Yeah.
Steve, what did you think you were doing? I don't know. I was just drawing comics, man. You know, it was just one panel and then another panel, you know.
One of my first questions here is, what the hell have you done?
What, Steve? This is not a proud thing, Steve. What have I done? God, I made some shitty comics. Matt Fraction reached out to me and asked me if I'd be interested in working on Jimmy Olsen. I did what I always do and waffled and, yeah, maybe, I don't know, kind of, sort of, I don't know. Anytime I'm committing to a 12-issue project, that's like, do I really want to do whatever this is for the next year of my life? I was afraid that because Jimmy Olsen was a Superman character that we'd be poked and pushed around by the Superman office and have to deal with whatever they were doing in the Superman books at the time. I didn't know that it would be the most delightful script anyone ever handed to me. It's stupid. It's injustifiable that I didn't leap on it immediately, but I did leap on it immediately. Boy, am I glad I said yes. It's written as a big collection of very, very short stories, 2, 3, 4, 5-page stories, which initially seem unconnected, but as you read, you realize they're all part of one narrative, just presented fragmented and out of order, and you get part of the fun of the story is putting them together in your head.
It's kind of the trap of those Silver Age books is they rarely transcend the promise of the premise, which was always given to you in the first panel. It was sort of like a mini cover, and then it would cut back and show you how you've gotten into this mess or whatever. I knew I wanted to do short stories, and then somewhere along the line, it became like, how do I make this interesting? I'm not a mystery writer. I'm not Greg Rucka. I don't think like that. I don't know how to think like that, but how can I make the structure a feature rather than a bug? How do I make it part of a story in a way that coheres? And how can I make it a mystery that you're solving as you go by virtue of being a fixed and finite object in time and space? Comics have a beginning, middle, and end, right? This is the beginning. This is the middle, literally, because there's the staples. And that's the end. So by virtue of just that, how we navigate these things, the structure, understanding that no matter how scrambled an issue is going to go, there's still going to be a beginning and a middle and an end. Whether or not they're congruent events, because the first story comes first, the middle story comes in the middle, and the last story comes at the end, right? We're going to see that progression. So could I, was it possible to play with that and you make it regardless of the chronology of things. Does this still work as a story with a beginning, middle, and an end? Does it work as a single unit of comics? Do all of the chapters work? So then all the chapters have beginnings, middles, and ends? And then does it work as a whole kind of collected thing? But this is like a period in my life where that was my, for whatever reason, thematic obsession. And how do you manage that? Because we're fucking pain in the ass. So it's a lot of notebooks and colored pencils and colored index cards. I remember being over at Brian's one night with Greg, and I was literally sitting there with colored pencils, mapping the book so far, with each color indicating a different plot thread. So I could just stand back and at a glance see that all the different colors were being served. And like, oh, there wasn't a lot of green this issue, so there needs to be some green the next issue, right? And just that kind of feeling my way through. And I fucked up a lot.
There were pages that I drew in my first week on the book that didn't appear in print until like issue 6 or 7 because things got moved around.
But it was messy and difficult and took a lot of work.
And then they got moved around again when we reprinted the book.
No one's ever brought it up about the trade. Since we had the trade, I resequenced it and made this whole kind of wish list and sent it, and the collections department was like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. But they moved one story and no one's noticed. No one's ever brought it up to me anyway. But I also do a lot of homework and work really hard to try to make it look like I don't work hard. I wanted it to look effortless and light and fun and goofy, but it was intricately fucking structured. It's like the most structured, considered thing. But like, how do but I don't want to look sweaty. So how do you obscure all the hard work that shows up? And how do you? I don't know. Probably jokes go a long way to cover that up.
My career changed a lot around 2010, actually. Matt Fraction brought me aboard for a fill-in issue of Hawkeye. Our late studio mate Jesse Ham and I both worked on that issue. And that made a big difference in my career because that was one of the first times in my career that anyone had ever paid me to be funny. For 20 plus years, my work was where funny went to die. Put that in text underneath my where funny goes to die.
I never try to be funny. I never set out to tell jokes, but it just comes out of the moment. I try not to be ironic with it. Like I try not to be like self-deflating. Like I like laughing with the characters in the moment rather than at them for being in the moment.
I had to change how I drew. I was working more like an illustrator than a cartoonist, not nearly as much shorthand as a cartoonist uses, a lot less symbolic drawing, much more literal drawing, lots and lots of texture and environmental detail and carefully rendered lighting, just trying to make very impressive pen and ink drawings, panel after panel. And what I realized is that if I even attempted that, it killed the jokes. It just made them not funny. It made the picture of light washing over a human head instead of the punchline of a joke. I had trouble stopping myself from applying these abilities that I had. I know how to do it, so I may as well add more value to the picture by adding more detail. With this, I finally had a reason to stop. Is it funny? Put the pen down. It doesn't matter if it doesn't look like the drawing is done. Does the joke land? Stop, because one extra line can make it not funny anymore. Because I had a concrete goal. Funny. Will this get a laugh? Does this make me laugh? Having that precise goal made it easy to stop, which nothing else ever had.
I'm sorry, it's a fucking Superman comic. You can crack a smile, it's okay, you know? With this, I don't know how you don't laugh at this. It's all funny, it's all absurd. And if we're treating it like, no, this is Jimmy's life, it's all real. Like it's all happened to him. I'm sorry, you were a giant turtle? And now you're wearing Metamorpho's underpants. It's funny.
There's a food cart that Jimmy gets bounced off of that I named the Frying Graces. I like that there's an Uber sticker flying around the inside of the Batmobile. It's just flying around in there along with a little dark side toy and an 8-track of Boston's first album. That was one of the few edits I got. I'd originally put CDs, like he just had a bunch of CDs on the bench seat next to him, and then we took a turn, they all went flying around the front seat. But I was informed that the Batmobile does not have a CD player, so that was when I put in an 8-track. We had a gag in there. Matt had written a wonderful gag where Batman is in a prank war with Jimmy Olsen.
I agree with Jimmy and think that Batman is hilarious. I think if you live in a cave with a giant penny and a dinosaur, you know what you're doing.
And he's sitting in the Batcave, contemplating the weapons of his enemy the way Batman will. And in this case, as it was originally written, we had him contemplating a rubber chicken.
And the idea of him having to adapt his tactical sort of sensibilities to a prank war was interesting. It's like, all right, so Batman would do like a thorough study, right? And there's nothing more unfunny than studying funny. But this is how Batman was going to up his game to meet Jimmy Olsen's tactics on the prank battlefield.
And he looks at it and he grabs that chicken by the throat and squeezes it, and the eyes bulge, and it goes way a rubber chicken will.
That was it. Just Batman with a rubber chicken, like, jokes. It's hilarious. When the art came back and Steve executed exactly as written, it was entirely on me that on a slow news day, someone could point to this page and say, oh, I get it, Batman's choking the chicken in the Batcave. I could not have cared less. It's not like, when I make a dick joke, you're gonna know. I'm not going to be clever about it. I was writing Sex Criminals at the time. If I wanted to do a dirty joke, I had built myself a palatial amphitheater with Chip Zdarsky that allowed me to do all the dirty jokes I wanted. I was deeply concerned that people were going to get in trouble. Not us, a little us, but people were going to get fired. We were going to get our editor, Jessica Chen, fired. I kept saying, we need to change, we need to patch that art. People are going to think he's choking the chicken and I'm trying to do a joke and it's not. And Jessica kind of, haha, funny, yeah. And then 20 minutes later, emailed like, is this like a masturbation joke?
I was the production guy on the entire run of the Jimmy Olsen book. It was about Thursday night, and Jess Chen comes to my desk. She goes, hey, do you remember this page? She had the correction sheet out. And she said, do you remember this page? You know, with the chicken, everything with the chicken. I was like, yeah. You just make you think of masturbation. And I sat there for a second, and I was like, well, now I can't think of anything but that. Like it does now that you've said it. And she's like, oh, okay. But like, do you think the expression choking the chicken, does that seem like common parlance at this point or not? Is this something that generationally translates down?
It is not an expression her generation uses in the popular argot. So what is it? He's polishing the bailiwick. What is that? What is that? I don't understand. He's abusing the vicar. What? And the scene works, the joke works. Everything is exactly the same. It's with the arrow through the head, the instinct of like, oh, how does the world's most serious person teach himself to be funny? And so you were on a flight to a convention?
Yep. Yeah, I remember I got the email and I very quickly wrote back to my editor guys, they're about to close the cabin door and take off. I have no drawing equipment with me. I cannot fix this panel, and I know this has to get to press.
This is Thursday night. This was before print runs on Friday, so we were getting books out. And she comes back and she says, hey, can you remove the chicken and replace it with an arrow through the head? And to Steve, Steve's on a plane. He wants you to do this. And I was like, okay, great. And then I went and I removed the chicken and I put the arrow through the head. It was one of those many moments in a comics career where you sit there and you're like, I'm getting paid to do this right now. I'm getting paid to do this absolutely brilliantly ridiculous thing.
It got memed very quickly. Batman wearing the arrow through the head saying, I'm also hilarious. I've seen so many people on Tumblr and X Twitter and other places saying it's funny, but it's obviously a fake that somebody photoshopped. And, that comic saw print. We got paid for it.
It is funny though, because they're not entirely wrong. It has been manipulated.
It's true. Yeah. And it was manipulated before it went to press, not after.
The joke works is exactly the same, and Jessica didn't get fired. But you can see the original art in the hardcover collection. It was a messy birth. A perfect example, as you'll see in the hardcover, originally the character of Jix was Catwoman. The Bat wedding had just not happened. And while I knew there was controversy, I thought it'd be hilarious if Jimmy woke up in Vegas married to Catwoman after Batman had just not married her. And it was drawn and inked. And then it got flagged. And so that we had to change it. I was like, this has been written for months. It's been drawn and it's done. And now on readout, it's an issue. It wasn't making fun of anything that any of the creators or editors were dealing with because of the fallout from Batman not marrying Catwoman. It was just about the absurdity of, if Batman can't marry Catwoman, no one can, except Jimmy. And obviously, look, it all worked out. It all worked out. So, I mean, this,
and then in the midst of it, COVID happened. And DC said pencils down for a few months. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone was feeling various forms of grim and sad. And I looked around thinking, we're never coming back here. I assumed the worst. Did not believe that it would be 2 weeks. I would go in once a month to check the mail or to pick up some art supply or some book that was in storage there. But essentially, the building was a mausoleum. That was the summer that Portland had both rioting in the streets and the incredible worst air quality on planet Earth. But between the pandemic and AQI of 520 or something, and the police near my house firing tear gas into the air every night for a month, the whole world is just out to kill lungs. A lot of people moved out of town, so we lost members from that. One member died, Jesse Ham. Other folks got used to not coming in. Yeah, it really whaled away at our membership pretty hard. Yeah. And it took us a while to recover. I think moving into this new space was a big part of that recovery. But yeah, it sucked immeasurably.
I had been in a situation before where a lot of different things I was writing kind of ended in the same little window. And there was a real sense of loss and processing that was difficult. I had sort of disassociation of identity. Wait, if I'm not doing this thing, oh no, all of my friends are gone. All the people I'd spent all of my time with in my head were gone. My time was done. It was over. And it was hard. So when COVID hit, I was entering into a similar place where it's about to land 5 planes, one after the next. I knew, having gone through that before, oh, that really fucked me up before. That made me really sad and weird for a little bit. So be aware, right? With that kind of foreknowledge, and then COVID, it made me steer consciously harder into the blazing saddles of it all.
I think both Matt and I, we went from feeling like this is a delightful little frolic to this is morale for the troops. I mean, we always went into it feeling like we want to be entertaining, but suddenly we felt like we had a responsibility to make people laugh because things were so unrelentingly grim that let's give them blazing saddles.
That sort of became the mode that I was operating in, is like make it bigger, how big can this get? The story beats were all more or less the same, but the scale got a lot bigger because I wanted it to feel like the end of Blazing Saddles. They need to crash through a wall and there's a musical happening over here. And then this happens and that happens. And then they all go running through the Warner Brothers lot. But as such, it made me want to invest more into all of those endings about how I felt about them ending, not just the story. In the case of Jimmy, it was like, this is as close to Blazing Saddles as it's going to come. It's 12 issues, it's issue 11, and we're not going to lose people. Just do it.
Comixology presents the 33rd Annual Will Eisner Comic Industry Awards. Hello, everybody. I'm Phil Lamar, and I want to welcome you to the 33rd Annual Eisner Awards.
The Eisners that year were entirely online. There was no live audience.
Now, in the past, of course, the awards were presented in a gala ceremony in a sumptuous hotel ballroom in beautiful downtown San Diego.
I think it was a YouTube stream. They had a comics-friendly celebrity doing the announcements, and I can't remember how or who.
With lots of celebrity presenters and most of the recipients usually on hand to give really heartfelt acceptance speeches. But
God bless anyone who has the patience to sit and watch an announcer just reading off the list of nominees and then saying things without anybody coming up and giving speeches or anything like that.
Our next category is Best Humor Publication. The award goes to Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen.
I'm sure there's more thankless tasks in showbiz, but that's pretty rough.
Next up, Best Limited Series. The Eisner Award goes to Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen.
It was a lot of fun. I got sent two of the awards. One I kept, the other I gave to Tom Rogers, who's my background assistant. Tom worked his ass off on that book. He did amazing work. The whole team did. Fraction and I got the Eisner trophies. The whole team deserved an award because that is a team effort, and the book would not be what it was if everybody hadn't been working so hard together. Nathan Fairbairn's color choices are exquisite. He worked with this near flat but still very, very gently rendered thing, and every choice he made was with story in mind. Similarly, Clayton Calls. I love Clayton's work. Every balloon is impeccably crafted, perfectly shaped. He knows how to be funny with type. It's great. I love working with him. This was a real challenge for a letterer working on this book because we had essentially a new splash page with a new font-heavy introduction every 5 or 6 pages of every issue. It is a beautifully produced omnibus hardcover collecting all of our Jimmy Olsen work, not just the stuff that appeared in the series, but stuff that appeared in
and around,
in and around the series.
Including the hard-to-find Perry White, Jimmy Olsen's boss, Perry White, #1, or Superman's boss.
Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen's boss, Perry White.
Right. Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen's boss, Perry White, #1. That's impossible to find.
So there's 2 terrific essays by Matt.
A ton of your cover sketches I can't believe we didn't jump on.
And a cover that was a labor of love for me and just a big labor for the legal department. We have here is an original copy of Superman versus Muhammad Ali, the Treasury Edition from 1978. Printed on glorious newsprint, and we borrowed a character from this book, Hyunda. He was one of the leaders of the aliens known as the Scrub, and we used him in an issue. And when we did that, Matt and I talked about wanting to do a cover based on this cover.
The cover was, had Superman fighting Muhammad Ali in a boxing ring surrounded by various celebrities of the time, pop culture figures or DC employees. It came with a key of the 87 real people who were there, like Henry Kissinger and Jeanette Kahn. It was all over the place. But we had the idea, since we sort of brought the Hunya into Jimmy, we should do that. But who do you fill the crowd with? Who do you fill the stands with? And the first idea was it should be everybody on the first cover that's still alive. And if they've died, the seats are empty. And since they keep reprinting it, I know they've got the agreements at legal, but the lawyers did not care to double check me on that, and were not amused.
Yeah.
We solicited from all of our friends, and Steve drew how many?
There's, give or take, 140 real people. A crowd that is absolutely packed full of characters and comics people and as many jokes as I can sneak in there. I made things very difficult for the legal department. I think they have 140 likeness releases that they're going to have to get signed. Sorry, guys. This is the requirement of high art. And I spent better part of 10 days working my butt off to nail their likenesses. It's loaded with jokes that I don't want to spoil here. Lay the new version over the original version and see where there are comparisons to be made by who's sitting where.
And there's a key that tells you who everyone is. There's some dissembly going on to cleverly dodge certain legal bullets. And the book's already out when this comes out. It's Barbara Gordon. She's sitting in Peter Falk, Columbo's place. Speaking of Columbo, have you seen Poker Face?
Oh,
it's great.
I'll have to take a look. It's funny. I think it started off as my cover to Sgt. Pepper's, and by the end, it was more like the last scene in All That Jazz when Roy Scheider's character, Joe Gideon, the stand-in for Bob Fosse, is running into the stands of this symbolic last performance and greeting everybody he's ever known. And it felt like that.
I guess that's sort of the most gratifying thing that in terms of response from the book is like lovely as the acclaim is, but like when other writers recognize, oh shit, and see other people who kind of do what we do and understand, can see like, oh, you really just smash yourself in the face with a hammer for this. And yeah.